Hi, I am Danny Young, and I am down in the drumshin here with TreeHouse Drums and the creator and owner, Derek Sharp. How are you, Derek?
Hi, I'm fine, thanks. Thanks a lot for coming and taking time out of your busy schedule.
I currently live in New York, and when living in New York, obviously it's almost impossible to be taking a full-size drum set. I mean, I've got some kits that have 24-inch bass drums. I can't be taking 7 cases in a cab or on the train to try and get to a gig. A fun new project that we've been working on is something called a compact kit. If you want to briefly touch on what a compact kit is, and then we can go into more details on sort of how it got, dreamed up.
Well, the idea is the Russian nesting dolls, where the drums fit inside each other. And in no way am I claiming that that was my original concept, but maybe my take on it has a few tweaks that make it somewhat unique. That's what I'm going for, my version of the concept. So these drums that I make have bottom heads. They're real drums. They're maple with proper bearing edges and proper tunings. In some cases, some of the drums are a little bit short to fit within each other, but in others, they're full size, and depending on how the customer wants the different drums to be combined. For example, somebody may not want to put the snare in the bass. Maybe they want a bass drum case with basses and toms and a snare drum separate, in which case the floor tom can be a standard depth. Otherwise, the floor tom gets shortened a bit for the snare to fit in. But the idea is a real drum set that sounds great, that can fit in one case.
How many trials and errors did you sort of go through and, sleepless nights of trying to figure this out, I guess, is my curiosity, because, I mean, all of a sudden it just showed up in the mail to me, and it works great.
Well, what happened, we got the first conversation in June, and then it was the following March. So, 8-9 months after working on it, we finally came to market with our first prototype. And this is another thing, it's the first time in the history of TreeHouse that we did some beta testing. I made some sets and sent them to a few drummers. They all happened to be guys either on touring Broadway shows or in New York City. Different situations than Topeka, Kansas, where they had to use these drums in tight spaces and talk about subways and taxi cab trunks and so forth, and just say, mess with them, play them, see what happens, use them up, and tell me if there were problems, if things fit, if they worked. But for that 9-month or so span, it was doing the math to figure out what drums fit within each other. Now my price list shows 29 configurations, but there are lots more. I mean, think about it. If you wanted an 8-inch mounted tom in a 24-inch bass drum, you can do all kinds of stuff. But practical drum set configurations from 16 to 20-inch bass drums, I have 29 configurations worked out that I know will fit.
Yeah, you forget about the lug length and the mount length and all of that stuff, and that's all got to fit inside too. But then there's also mounting inside the drum that you have to sort of compensate for.
Oh man, I wish a 12-inch mounted tom would behave in a 14-inch floor tom, but that ain't so. I have to have 3 or sometimes 4 inches of diameter difference between the drums for them to fit. 10, 13, 16 fit in a 20-inch bass, where 8, 12, 15 fit in an 18-inch bass. That idea of finding those different sizes that will fit within each other is compounded by floor tom blade brackets and strainers and tom arm brackets, things like that have to be worked out, and spent a long time doing the math to see what works.
So really where I got to, I guess, my breaking point in New York of where are these nesting kits and why don't they exist was I got called to go play a country gig. Now, a country gig, typically, you're using a decent-sized drum set. I mean, I don't want to use just a floor tom and a snare necessarily for that kit. So I ended up stacking up an entire drum set on a cart. I had a giant hardware bag, my cymbal bag on my back. I had another backpack I was wearing on my front. I got in the subway. I figured out a way that I could use only, subway stops that had elevators. But then, lo and behold, who knew, on a Saturday night, one of the trains doesn't run past a certain time. So I got stuck at the bottom of a 5-story stairway with my cart, started trying to make it up the stairs, and my cart broke. And literally, that was the moment that I said, this is absolutely ridiculous. I'm calling Derek Sharp. I might have even called you there. I might have been a little angry. But
It's like 3 in the morning. Why are you calling me there?
So, because this is a nesting kit, that essentially means, I mean, since all the drums are going inside each other, that you have to be able to get inside the drums. Now, if the toms and bass drum are coming apart, how did you go about, I guess, creating a sound that was consistent, or getting the toms to fit together correctly?
Well, one thing is that I don't claim to be a scientist that has tested a sound wave on a computer to say some absolute here. But what I do claim is to be a drummer that's been playing for 30 plus years that is telling you when I hit this drum with a break in the shell and then another drum that's identical without that break, to my ears they sound the same. What I did eventually is what I call a seam lip. So you can see here on this drum the lid comes off. That's the batter head, and then there's this part of the shell that I call the seam lip. It's basically a reinforcing hoop that's standing a little tall, and then the lid can fit right over here. That creates a seal all the way around the drum that's airtight. There's no light that gets through. It doesn't buzz or rattle. There's nothing weird about it. Sound-wise, I can't hear a difference.
And I can't either. I mean, I've got one of the kits, and I can honestly tell you it sounds just as good, if not better, considering the size of these. I mean, these are small drums, but they have just as much depth, just as much punch.
Well, that was really important to me. If this thing just looked cool, then who cares? It's got to sound right. It's got to sound real. Well, they are real. They're not, a single-headed thing or a mesh-head toy or something. They're real drums. And that was very kind of you to say that they sounded good, but you have the original, you have the prototype version of the seal that has been improved upon, and now the new standard is that seam lip that I showed you. But even your kit has the same clamp as this drum. This is the key. It took me about 7 months to find this little pair of chunks of metal. These came to me from a place that has a catalog of 5,500 pages, and that clamp is not in their catalog. It's on their website. It took forever to find this. What I needed to secure the drum, in addition to that seam lip that I use now, was a clamp. See if I can get this in the camera view here. This clamp, I wanted it to be bulletproof, to be easy to operate in the dark, that a drummer after a gig can just accurately feel where everything is, on or off, nothing in between, not going to fail, not going to twist or bend, no buzzing, no rattling. I wanted it to be low profile so it fits in the case without sticking out. Simple to operate, yeah, but also cost effective. Something that I can afford and that the customer can afford to buy. And I found a clamp that has all this stuff but one on my to-do list. One thing that's missing is that I wanted both sides of the clamp to be quiet when the clamp was open. You see here, this clamp isn't engaged yet, but it's going to rattle a little bit. I've got an artist that wants to play the tom by taking it apart from being a regular drum set drum and having two frame drums, two lids basically, and one side now would rattle. And I've got a solution for that that's a little bit complicated, but it works. For now, I figured I can't spend any more time. After 8 or 9 months of prototyping and figuring this thing out, let's just get this thing to market and see if it works. And you landed the prototype, and I was a bit like, dude, thanks for saying that it fits and it sounds okay, but bring it back. Let me get you a fresh one. And you're like, nope, ain't broke, no fix. And so I thank you for taking that drum and putting it through its paces, and I'm glad that you're enjoying it and that you're using it.
This, and my compact kit has actually been, it was with me in New York for about 6 months, doing subway trips, multiple musicals. It's since been on the road with me on Queen's We Will Rock You tour for 9 months. Traveling in semis. I have been putting this thing to the test, and it's been absolutely stellar. It's been incredible.
Okay, so tell me, anything broken, anything misbehaving, what's going on?
The only problem that we ended up having with it was something that we resolved, and that was the hoop that I had on my front drum head was not, it was the head that was on the front of the drum, was a tom head instead of a bass drum head, which meant that the rim around was too small, and my bass drum hoop was slipping over top.
Okay, so what's going on there is that this drum set concept has, you'll notice from the pictures, a bass drum hoop for the pedal, the regular batter wooden hoop, and then the audience side has a metal hoop, a floor tom hoop, and that's intentional. It kind of looks unusual. For a little bit of a price upgrade, I can make the front of the drum look like a traditional bass drum with a wooden hoop. But the design is for that front hoop to be metal, and that's because it's smaller, it's lighter, replacement heads out in the field are less expensive and easier to find. And if you have a 16-inch bass drum, not every place is going to have a 16-inch audience-sized bass drum head. And what Danny was referring to is that the tom head that fits the metal hoop is a little bit different size than a bass drum head that fits the wooden hoop with the clamps. Either one is available for the customer at their preference. The prototype got shipped out, unfortunately, with the wrong head for the hoop, and we fixed that, but it's a great learning curve. I don't mind mistakes, I don't mind issues, because that's how I learn, but be assured, after 18 or 20 of these kits, we've worked out the bugs. What you would get would be great.